Right. Hello, everybody. My first live stream on this new Seahawks channel, Seahawk Boy Mike. I am Seahawk Boy Mike, ready to talk to you about some NFL football. And tonight, there's actually big news in the Seattle Seahawks coaching search. And it is a really, really big deal for the team because we dodged a bullet. There were lots of rumors out there about who the Seattle Seahawks were looking at. There were a bunch of people that they brought in, including for second interviews. Ejiro, some guy I've never heard of. Ejiro, something from the worst team in the league, the Carolina Panthers. It was very disturbing. It was actually very disturbing that the Seahawks were actually looking at this guy. Another name on there that was really alarming to me was Raheem Morris, who is the defensive coordinator, or was a defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. Well, it turns out, lo and behold, guess what? That Raheem Morris has been hired by the Atlanta Falcons to be their new head coach. This is great because he was going to be headed to Seattle for his second interview. And while a lot of people think the Seahawks are just going to go for Dan Quinn or Mike Vrabel or some of the more obvious choices, a lot of people thought this guy might actually get the job. Now, this is very upsetting to me because, quite honestly, I don't think that Raheem Morris is really any good. And the reason I don't think it's good is because his record over the years has actually been really, really terrible. So when you look at what he did previously, let's go to share screen. Let's go to Raheem Morris. When you look at his record, you go to his Wikipedia page, really what you see is that he's just simply not very good. He was coached at a lot of different places. You have to give him some credit for being somewhat successful at some of these places. But in reality, his record as a head coach is pretty bad. He was a head coach of Tampa Bay. In 2009, he was hired, I believe, from the Broncos at that time. They went 3-13. The following year, he got a lot of credit because they ended up third in the NFC South at 10-6. But then they cratered again to 4-12, and he ended that stint in Tampa Bay at 17-31. Then he was the Atlanta Falcons' temporary head coach in 2020 when they fired their previous head coach, I believe was Dan Quinn. And he went 4-7. So the problem there was obviously not Dan Quinn, who's one of the coaching candidates for the Seattle Seahawks job. The problem was quite clearly Raheem Morris. And his total record as a head coach is 356. 356 is his winning percentage. Now, a lot of people say, well, he deserved a second chance. And there's all this pressure amongst NFL media. Oh, Raheem Morris. Oh, he's a great coach. Oh, he needs to be, he deserves a head coaching chance, all of which is racially based. Everybody, all these liberal reporters like, Albert Breer and these folks, there's this whole liberal racial agenda. Well, why did this guy deserve a second chance? And people said, well, Bill Belichick failed in his first time as head coach. And, there is some, I guess there is some truth to that. But the problem is that the truth is actually that Belichick was significantly better than Raheem Morris was. If you look at his winning percentage, it's way, way up there. He was actually with the Cleveland Browns as a head coach, and he did not do great with the Cleveland Browns. But look at his first season, 6-10. They lacked talent. 2 7-9 seasons, and then 1994 they went 11-5, and then 5-11. But that winning percentage is still 45%. It's almost 50-50. So, given that they had very little talent, Belichick showed a lot more promise as a head coach than Raheem Morris ever has by a significant factor. And of course, we all know Belichick went on to win Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl, including the one that we gave to him in 2014, Super Bowl X-Lix. So that was a complete disaster. But, again, these guys are really interesting candidates. The problem is, they're really, interesting because Bill Belichick was actually the guy. He was actually the guy that was expected to get the Atlanta job. He interviewed a couple times. Everybody thought it was a great fit. And Belichick wanted to go to a place where he would have complete control of the roster. Now, he's not going to have that in Seattle, but John Schneider does. But I'm hoping, first of all, I'm just glad we dodged the Raheem Morris bullet because he would have been a terrible choice. I did not advocate to fire Pete Carroll so that we could hire a bum like Raheem Morris. Okay, I didn't. I that was not why I wanted to. If you had told me that we're going to get rid of Pete Carroll, oh great, fantastic, I'm really behind that. But we're going to hire Raheem Morris to replace him. I would have said, let's just stick with Pete Carroll and suffer through another 9 and 8 year where everything sucks because that's what we're going to get. I would not have gone for that. Now, a couple things that I think are really interesting. You look at candidates now. The guys that are left are Dan Quinn has to be number one. And there's talk that Dan Quinn will bring Chip Kelly with him as an offensive coordinator. And it's, I mean, I see people out on Seahawks, oh, this would be a disaster. Well, why? Dan Quinn has been a very efficient head coach. He took his team to the Super Bowl in 2015. They should have beaten the Patriots in that game. And it was only because Kyle Shanahan refused to run. They basically had an 8-point lead. They had a chance to extend it to an 11-point lead. And Kyle Shanahan, when they got the ball down inside the 40-yard line with about 4 or 5 minutes to play, refused to run the ball. He called 3 passing plays. They got sacked twice. And the Patriots, they ended up punting. The Patriots went on to take the ball down, score, get a 2-point conversion, and win the game in overtime. Kyle Shanahan blew that game, not Dan Quinn. When Dan Quinn was in Seattle, he was extremely efficient. The defenses were really good. And everybody's like, oh, well, you had the Legion of Boom. That's true. You had the Legion of Boom defense. But I'll tell you one thing about those defenses. They were disciplined. They communicated. They knew what fucking coverage they were in, unlike Pete Carroll's defenses in the last 5 years. And they always were in the right place at the right time, and they tackled well. The Seattle Seahawks defense doesn't do any of those things anymore under Pete Carroll. And so Dan Quinn wouldn't be a bad replacement. Chip Kelly has been an innovative offensive mind. He's a guy a lot like Andy Reid in terms of what he's willing to innovate and do offensively. And I wouldn't mind at all drafting a new quarterback, number one. I'm not going to mention any names, Spencer Rattler, and putting him with Chip Kelly for 3 years, because it's unlikely Chip Kelly is going to be stolen away during that 3-year period. It's extremely important for a young quarterback, a new quarterback, and John Schneider made this point the other day, to have the same offensive coordinator for year 1, year 2, and year 3 in his development. I mean, Justin Fields, you look at Justin Fields in Chicago, who you give me Justin Fields for the 16th pick, okay, I'm down with that, because I know Justin Fields can play and be successful in this league, and the athletic talent is off the scale. Justin Fields can be a superstar with the right players around him. And when you pair him with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith, Nick Jigba, and maybe bring back your Fant as your tight end, and you've got Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet as running backs, and draft a couple of offensive linemen, you've got something going there with Justin Fields. He never had talent like that in Chicago. So I'm fine with that. A Chip Kelly, Dan Quinn, Justin Fields, or a Chip Kelly, Dan Quinn, Spencer Rattler, or even Michael Penix, or even maybe Bo Nix pairing for the next 5 years would be fine with me, or at least the next 3 years would be absolutely fine with me. But I have to admit, Quinn's Dallas defense got run over in their playoff game against the Packers. There's no question about it, but they had issues. They had injury issues. They did not have big guys they could put on the defensive line, and they got run over. But that was more personnel, actually, than I think it was his coaching or his scheme. Okay, let's say you don't want Dan Quinn, though, and you don't want Chip Kelly. Fine. Who are the other candidates? Who are the other guys we like? Mike Vrabel makes a lot of sense because, again, he's a defensive coach that his teams tend to play disciplined. They're not stupid. They don't make stupid mistakes like the Pete Carroll teams have. They don't line up like we did under Pete Carroll and try to do a hard count on 3rd or 4th and 1 and have our guys jump offside, like happened so many times in the Pete Carroll era. It was so frustrating that his teams played so dumb. I don't think Mike Vrabel's teams would play dumb. Having said that, neither Dan Quinn nor Mike Vrabel is my first choice. My actual first choice would be a coach from the Baltimore Ravens named Mike McDonald, who has done a fantastic job with the Ravens, and they had a terrific defense that absolutely crushed. I mean, it absolutely crushed the Seattle Seahawks 37-3. He is their defensive coordinator. He's a hot commodity. He probably wouldn't demand or insist on total control of the roster, which John Schneider is not going to give up. And you can do the same thing. You can bring in a new quarterback. You can have Mike McDonald bring in his own offensive coordinator. We haven't had a chance to interview him yet because of various vagaries in the NFL rules. They haven't been able to interview him. So I really like this guy, though. He would probably be my first choice. Now, if you want an offensive minded head coach, you can go that way too. You can also go back and get yourself Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions is another good candidate. His teams have done really well. He's managed to coach up Jared Goff, is a guy who a lot of people gave up on. I never gave up on Jared Goff. I always thought Goff was underrated. He's been the offensive coordinator for 2 years with the Lions. He's done a terrific job. The Lions have scored a lot of points. And quite honestly, we have better offensive talent in the skill positions than the Lions do. We don't have the offensive line that they have. They got Penei Sewell, who was fantastic, and some other guys. We also don't have the quarterback. Jared Goff has his arm talent, his ability is better. So you might bring in Ben Johnson, go get Justin Fields. He's coached against Fields a couple times. We'll know right away what Ben Johnson thinks of him. Those guys would be great candidates as far as I'm concerned. I'd be happy with almost any of them except the two guys I really don't want. One of whom was Raheem Morris. The other of whom is Ejiro Evero, some bum from Carolina who's gotten 2 interviews. How do you get 2 interviews? I mean, I can understand. Okay, there's this guy, Ejiro Evero, who nobody's heard of. He's some sort of coordinator, defensive coordinator for a terrible team. But we think he has potential. We're going to bring him in to talk to him. You do that once. You don't bring him in for 2 interviews unless you're serious about him. That is a waste of resources. I totally get John Schneider wanting to cast a wide net. Well, it's time to stop casting a wide net. It's time to get focused on your top 4 or 5 candidates. And your top 4 or 5 candidates, I think, are going to be Vrabel, Quinn, Mike McDonald, and Ben Johnson. And I'm going to throw out, there's also another guy named Graham, who I don't know much about, that Charlie Weiss was talking about on Sirius NFL Radio today. I'm going to do some research on him. I have a whole one viewer on this. Guys, it'll grow. We're going to grow this site because we're going to use brains and common sense. But I wanted, I'm interested in who this Graham guy is. I got to look him up. I'm not sure who he is. He says he's a dark horse in Seattle. I don't know what Charlie Weiss knows, but he might know something. So we got to pay attention to that. But here's one more I'm going to throw out before I end this stream and go have my dinner. Nobody's hired Bill Belichick yet. Bill Belichick is the greatest coach in NFL history. If he's been humbled by this process, if he realizes that nobody's going to give him complete control over their football operation because of the way he drafted in the last 4 or 5 years, if he's willing to say to John Schneider, I will work with you, we will agree on the position, Belichick would agree to a power sharing structure with John Schneider. I would give my left nut, a piece of anatomy on the left side of my body, to have Bill Belichick coaching the Seattle Seahawks for the next 5 years, because this is a man who is highly motivated to win 15 more games to make him the winningest coach of all time and to win a Super Bowl without Tom Brady. And it doesn't come any more motivated than that. In that case, somebody like Ejiro Evero might be a good defensive coordinator for Bill Belichick. And maybe that's why they're doing the interview, because as John Schneider said, I pick the coaches now. So he does have some authority over who to assign as the head coach. And maybe they think Ejiro Evero can be a head coach in the future after a couple years as a defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick. So don't completely throw that idea out. That's there. All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up. I am going to go have my dinner. Interesting day. A lot of developments today. We're heading into the weekend pretty soon. It's Thursday night. Let's wait and see what happens. But this is really good, really interesting news. that Raheem Morris got hired by somebody else because I think he's going to suck just as bad as he's sucked before with the Atlanta Falcons. And the Falcons are going to look back on this and go, wow, that was a dumb move. Because the truth is, Bill Belichick is probably not going to be the Seattle Seahawks head coach. But if I were the owner, I'd be real interested. If I was Jody Allen, if I was a woman, you know, there'd be a lot of things different. But um, I think Belichick is the guy I would go for at this point. But any of the other ones I mentioned are all good candidates. We shall see what happens. Thanks for being here. Brand new channel, just getting started. You guys probably know me from my alien stuff. I'm going to create a Seahawk Boy Mike Twitter, and I will have that information up on the next stream, which, these are my days off. I may be streaming a lot about the Seahawks. There's a lot of news, a lot of stuff to talk about. I'm not trying to compete with anybody. I'm not trying to compete with Seahawks Brandon Nelson because he's a dumb fuck anyway. I'd like to get out there with guys like Rob Staten, and although I'll never go as deep on the analysis of players as Rob does. Rob does a terrific job, and why duplicate something somebody else does so well? But I'm definitely interested in continuing this. So thanks for being here. See you soon. Love you guys. Bye bye.